give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analyst. It's your boys from the NBA Draft Show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed. My name is Corey Tullivan, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Albert. Garbage time again. Albert, what's cracking, dude?
What is going on? It's God, Corey. It's January 30th, if you can believe it. It's
2024.
Unbelievable stuff. You got to get your expense reports in. You got to get your taxes done. The Knicks are the hottest team in the league. I've got a lot going on, but I'm excited to be here. We're talking about some guys that we're going to have some trouble pronouncing their names. Corey, I was listening to one of the games, and it was so clear that the broadcaster was an American. He read Risacher's name as Risacher, which was freaking hilarious.
Zaccharie Risacher sounds like some beefed up lineman from Iowa.
There it is. There it is. Played with I don't know. But really excited to talk about these guys. We will try our best not to butcher their names. We won't be calling them Risacher and Salaun. We're going to do our absolute best to have a lot of fun and talk about some really good players today.
Yeah, it is going to be a fun episode. I feel like this is, an episode that's been boiling under the surface for us, because I feel like, the Tylers have talked about these guys a lot. If you've been listening to the podcast, and I feel like we really haven't mentioned them all that much. So it's going to be interesting to have this conversation on, the French tandem of Zaccharie Risacher and Tidjane Salaun. So perfect. So let's just get into it, man. We're going to start with Salaun. Salaun is from France, forward. He is listed at 6'9", 211 if the math conversions from the team site were correct. I can't promise the math is correct, but I believe 6'9", 211. Although, interestingly enough, Gavoni has him listed at 6'11 in a recent Twitter post. So, I mean, he does look gigantic out there. And if you put, if you watch the game against Risacher, he looked bigger than him. So it would make sense that, he might be like 6'11. So he's going to be 18.86 years old on draft night. Currently averaging 22.9 minutes per game, 9.5 points per game, 3.2 rebounds, 0.8 assists to 1.3 turnovers, 1.2 steals, 0.2 blocks, shooting 43.6% from the floor, 37.8% from three on 3.9 attempts a game, 76.7% from the free throw line on 1.8 attempts per game. Preseason stock price, ESPN had him at 16. No Ceilings had him at 38. Bleacher Report had him at 31. Yahoo didn't have him ranked. The Athletic had him at 36. Tankathon had him at 23. That was an average price, 31.5. He was 24 on the Draft DAC IPO. Currently, ESPN has him all the way up at 6. No Ceilings had him at 18 in January. Bleacher Report has him at 28. Yahoo had him at 18. The Ringer, on their recent big board that Kevin O'Connor released, had him at 18. The Athletic hasn't done an update, so the most recent update is at 34, and then Tankathon has him at 14, average price of 19.4. He was 15th on the January draft rankings. So, Albert, with a current price of 19.4 and coming in at 15 on the current draft rankings, I ask you, is Salaun's stock price too high, too low, or is it just right?
I think for me, Corey, it sounds just about right. And to be honest, if you were to ask me about almost almost any player and where their draft stock is right now, I'd probably say it's just about right. It's just one of those years, right? Like a lot of these guys are going to end up in different ranges all over the place right now. And where they end up going on draft night may be drastically different. So it's hard to say. I think for me personally, I have him at 22 on my board, and I feel pretty good about that at this point. I don't think I'm crazy low on him. I don't think I'm crazy high. Obviously, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of what his game actually looks like and why we have him where we do on our personal boards. But if you told me right now that, we're taking a consensus of a bunch of different boards and they have him at, on an average score of about 15, that sounds about totally fair to me considering this class.
Yeah, me too. I think I have him at like 12 at the moment. And I feel like that part of the board is kind of like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not. It's this in this draft, it's a range where like maybe you can grab somebody who has like a higher ceiling, or you can grab somebody who has, a higher floor. It's just like, yeah, sure. Like whoever is in that range, I get it. Salaun, I mean, he is so young, and I mean, we talked about it. He might be 6'11". He's a big dude who shoots threes and, shows some stuff. I mean, there's certainly a lot of you can convince me that, he becomes one of the best players in the draft. You can convince me that he completely busts out. I think that's the fun of his evaluation. So let's get into the game, and we have to start with the shooting, right? Like, I think that's the main appeal. So he's shooting 38% for three on the year. So do you buy the shot, and what do you like or not like about it?
I definitely like the shot. And it's something where Corey, you just said he's shooting about like 38%. I know that's actually gone up from where it was before. So definitely deserves some credit. I remember Ignacio writing a piece about him a couple months back, and at the time he was shooting like in the 20s, also like in the 30s overall from the field. So the efficiency is definitely going up. And Corey, like when I look at whether it's his shooting or his game, as a whole, I just feel like it's that feeling where, Corey, we've all cooked pasta in our homes before. And, sometimes we all want to be great chefs, and we want to get our pasta to be al dente. We want it to be just right, good chew.
Not an al dente guy.
Oh, really? Okay.
No.
A lot of people do, right? But like
a lot of people do.
Along the process, you're like trying out your noodles, trying to make sure that you're getting into good play. Sometimes you'll take a strand of linguine and you'll bite into it 3 minutes early, and you get something hard in the middle, and it's terrible. And that's how I feel about Salaun right now. And I'm not saying that he's terrible. That absolutely not. What I'm trying to say is we're building towards something with Salaun. He is not a finished product, Corey. We started off by saying that he is a very young player, and that is absolutely true. And some of that youngness you can see, in my opinion, Corey, you could see it in some of his movement. You can see it in some of his flexibility, where I feel like it's going to get better, and also just overall his game. And so where I'm at right now is I'm kind of like, I'm being very careful with my evaluation with him today, because I'm considering all that in terms of how young he is and how young he is even in his development. But specifically with the shooting, I'm definitely a believer. I actually like the shot a lot. I think it's going to be pretty damn good, and it's going to be maybe his strongest skill set. I don't know. Obviously, once again, a lot still has to happen with him in his development, but I'm a believer in the shot. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and he's shooting it very confidently recently, getting those percentages up. And because I think that was part of like the sell with him early, is that he was this big dude who is kind of fluid, who could shoot. And then it's like, all right, but he's not shooting it that well. So like, if he's not shooting it that well, then really what's the appeal? Because he's not like one of these guys who has super high feel, like we'll talk about the passing, but that section probably isn't going to take very long, right, to talk about. But now he's really starting to, get the shots up at volume, and he's making teams pay. So I mean, I think he's a very good spot up shooter.
Yeah.
I think you see some of that youth that you talked about in like his footwork at sometimes. He's like a little fidgety, but even still, like when he hops into it or steps into it, like it looks good. He's got, I mean, if he's even if he's 6'9", right? Like he's big, he's tall, he's got a high release point. So like it's hard to get like a super good contest, high arcing ball. So I'm with you. I think the shot, especially in spot up situations, and that's mostly what he's going to be doing, early in his career, right? Like either spotting up or, maybe be used as a screener, or a guy, maybe you can run off like flares, like not like super complex movements, but a little bit. They run a lot of Spain action with him, popping to get him open. So the shooting is like the only skill where I'm like, this is something that I think is kind of bankable for him.
Yeah.
And it's an important skill, especially, when you are 6'10", 6'11". So, I think that's the appeal. Like if he's going to shoot 38%, if you told me like he's shooting 38% in the NBA, it's like, all right, no brainer. He's a lotto guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a lotto guy and a guy who eventually makes a lot of money. Is what it would be, because who knows if he's even done growing, right, Corey? Which I think is an important thing to talk about. And then
he's
also,
very young.
Right, he's very young, and also things get interesting for me with Salaun is, and I don't think this is a big part of his game right now. And Corey, you mentioned it already. It probably won't be a big part of his game early on. However, he's fluid. You mentioned it before, but it's something that it actually is a big part of who he is, and he actually has a pretty good handle for a guy his size too, right? So then you start to get frisky, you start to get excited, right? Because you say, okay, 6'10", 6'11", who knows, maybe even gets to 7 foot, a guy with that type of size, with that type of jump shot. Okay, he's a fluid athlete, he's growing into his body, he's not as awkward anymore. He can handle the ball too. Then you start dreaming, okay, what do we have on our hands here, right? What type of offensive player could he become? And so I would never, Corey, venture to get that far ahead and be like, yeah, what are we talking about? Kevin Durant? Never. That's not me, right? But you can see why NBA teams...
Durant didn't play in the 90s.
That too. But you can see why NBA front offices could get excited about a guy like Salaun because of the outside shooting that we've talked about already, and then some of these guard skills that he has, where you start to go, okay, if he puts all this together, we're going to be having a different type of conversation.
All right, so I want to touch on a few points that you mentioned. Can you talk about the fluidity? Because my notes I wrote, he's a stiff but fluid mover who needs to do some yoga.
Corey, Obi Toppin.
Yeah, a little Obi for sure.
Right.
Like he just looks like he's got like training wheels on.
Yep. And
he needs to just like take a fall and realize it's not that bad, and then like so he can fully get up and get into him. He's like a baby giraffe or something at times, where it's just like it's a little awkward, but like also he's super fluid, oddly, and like he could chase somebody like on defensively around a screen. So he's super weird in that regard, and a lot of it probably does have to do with his youth and the fact that he is as tall as he is, and like you said, maybe he's still growing. I'm not in love with his handle. He does, I think he's shown more willingness, and maybe it's partly due to role, to like be a self-creator than Risacher has. And he does have a move that he can go to that's kind of like his go-to move, which is like a couple of dribbles into like that little side step to the right. But I think with him, he's at his best when he keeps everything simple. When he's not trying to like show off a bag, and it's just like 1-2 dribbles into a shot, 1-2 to get into a spot. That's when I think he's really at his best. Like, and right now, like some of the flashes, like attacking a straight line, like I think because he is so big, like it's 1 or 2 dribbles and he's already at the rim. And then like even like he's got a little bit of mid post stuff, like nothing great, still being worked out and workshopped. But he's pretty big, and you can get like a little mid post fade or like a face up and 1 dribble and shoot over because he's so tall. For me, it's like keep it as simple as you can, because like when things start feeling a little dangerous, the more creative he decides he wants to be.
Yeah. And it's Corey, the fact that we're juxtaposing these two guys together while having this conversation, I think is also interesting because I kind of feel the same way for both guys. I kind of like the simplified roles for both dudes. Salaun, though, Corey, the point that you made is exactly what I've been feeling. He's and I wrote it in my notes. He just reminds me so much of Obi Toppin, where clearly there's an athleticism to him and a fluidity to him, but also like, his, like, what's wrong with the hips, what's wrong with, the flexibility. Like, he's like, doesn't really get low in his stance. There's just something about him that's very stiff to me. But it's weird because it's combined with this fluidity that doesn't really make sense, right?
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you with Salaun. I just mentioned it because NBA teams might dream. He's
with somebody who's as raw as him,
Right.
he's shown like these flashes, and it's like if you're gonna take him that high, you're like, all right, like, well, maybe we can get him to do this more consistently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I'm also not sure.
You wouldn't put $100 bet on it, but maybe $25.
Yeah, look, I think irregardless, if he comes over, like if he were to come over next year, like he is spending the whole year in the G League.
Yeah. Which is the norm now.
Absolutely. 100%. Like lottery picks spend time in the G League.
Right.
And it's totally fine. So it's probably a really good environment for him to workshop a lot of that stuff because, the G League is a type of thing where it's like, like teams are trying to win, but it's also like teams are trying to get their prospects to develop in a way that's going to help the real team. So he's a guy that if you believe in the self-creation and like the handle and the flashes of that at his height, you're going to be patient with it because it's definitely not happening overnight. He doesn't have that 6'11" Kevin Durant bag that was ready to come in and he could play shooting guard in Seattle his rookie year, right? Like this,
PJ.
Salaun is, to me, he is like as pure a four. I don't know, like a forward. Like there's not like a whole lot of like versatility in what he could do just based on where he's at right now. But it's interesting. The flashes are certainly interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think about his finishing?
Once again, right? I think it's interesting. Straight line stuff, fine. How'd you feel about his touch, Corey? Because I thought exactly that's my thing. Like, it's straight line going in for a dunk, sure, no problem, right? Once he tries like a floater or something in between, not so good, right? And I think, Corey, that also speaks to why he was shooting like 30-something% from the field overall earlier in the season. Like, it's not the greatest. And like, look at even that drive, Corey, that would just playing, like, there's no plan to that drive. That's just let me run middle and then figure something out midair, which is not always effective in the NBA, just the NBA being the highest level of basketball on the planet. Like, you can't just do that, And I think even that one, that's not the prettiest take. And so with him, it's weird. Like, there's a fluidity, athleticism to him, but also sometimes it looks like an absolute train wreck. So which why also, Corey, for me, like when I moved him like all over my board, kind of up, down, all over the place. I think right now he's at his highest he's ever been on my board. And I think part of it is because of all that we're talking about. It's so hard. And I wrote about it in my piece. It's coming out this Thursday too. Like, evaluating NBA wing prospects is so crazy hard when you're trying to juggle the theoretical with the actual, and like being like future minded and like trying to cast a vision for a player while also being realistic about what they can do and can't do is such a hard thing. And I think Salaun is a really interesting guy because some NBA teams are going to look at him as like a 4 or 5, and who knows, some other NBA teams might be like, all right, maybe we can turn this guy into an absolute wing. And I think, all of that is going to be really interesting. I personally wouldn't. If I was drafting Salaun in the lottery, I'd be like, hey man, we want you to be a shooting 4. is kind of how I would look at things and try to develop him that way, considering his size and all that. But it gets tricky with guys like this because of what you think they can be versus what they can actually do.
Yeah, he like around the rim and when he's driving, it seems like the type of guy who's like, hey man, I have this really fast car and I want you to ride it with me and we're gonna put the pedal to the metal, but also I'm not gonna turn the lights on. And the road's gonna be pitch black. And let's just see what happens. Like it might be awesome. It could be really exhilarating. And like it just seems like there's no plan sometimes. Like you mentioned, he gets up in the air and it's just like sometimes it looks brilliant because he can contort his body and like finish through the contact. And then most of the time it is just like super wild when he like is around people near the rim and he's not just like, you know, getting an open lane off of a closeout or a cut or in transition. You know, he's 6'11", and in the half court, he's finishing 46% of his attempts at the rim. Like, not good. Not good. 55% overall. So, you know, like this is something that like people killed Brandon Miller for, right? But like there was a whole different level of like fluidity and like ability to get to the rim in like a controlled way that you can buy into. Like to me, if he's not like just dunking it or laying it in off a cut or whatever, like if it's any of the self-created stuff, I'm like terrified of what is going to happen. And that's, I think, the thing that's really, because like the shot, it's great. And maybe he just becomes a guy who all he does is shoot threes. But at 6'11", you know, you want a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a little terrified.
It would be unfortunate if you became French Steve Novak, is what you're trying to say. And I'm right there with you, Corey. Like, I think just because of, you know, the size, length, frame combo and what we think he could be when he's, you know, fully developed and grown into, like, yeah, it would be an absolute nightmare if all he did was shoot threes, or maybe not a nightmare, but like, it's not the best, right? Like, what are we talking about? Like a jacked Davis Bertans? It's like, that's not what you want, you know, out of your lottery pick. So I'm right there with you. But you, like you said before, Corey, that's what the G League is for. I think the type of stuff that we're talking, like that drive is a mess. Like, and I don't know who's going to watch that and be like, "Ooh, I want more of that." Like that's actually really terrible. And he just went in. So people are going to think things. I don't know. But other than right there where he's going in a straight line to the basket, everything else is pretty terrifying. So I'm right there with you, man. It's a big area of growth for him.
It is a big area of growth. And look, he's grown throughout the year. So maybe that continues, right? And all of a sudden things slow down and the finishing looks a little bit better by the end of the year. I hope so. The passing, again, more of the same, like with the finishing where it's like a lot of stuff that feels like there's no plan. You know, he'll leave his feet and make like a jump pass, but not in like an awesome Tyrese Halliburton kind of way, or awesome like Derrick Rose kind of way, in a terrifying like, oh my God, where is this pass going to end up kind of way. Negative assist to turnover ratio, you know. So but at the same time, he's best as a play finisher instead of a play creator. And, you know, when we get to our, you know, our player comp portion of this breakdown, I think that we can find, you know, those roles, maybe like there are roles that could be effective for him, even if he isn't making plays consistently. So I don't really have much good to say. Like, obviously there are a few flashes where you're like, oh, that was a cool hit to the weak side wing or whatever, but like so few and far between that it's like, it's not even a flash.
Corey, it's hilarious because I literally wrote that in my notes too. Few and far in between. It's just, it's really not there. The negative assist to turnover ratio, it kind of speaks to what it really is and tells kind of the full story. It's a lot of it, as you said, not much of a plan, no real vision either. I mean, once again, nowadays, Corey, hitting the weak side feels less and less valuable because it feels like everyone just knows how to do it, even if you're not a passer. And it's funny, I had a really interesting conversation with a lot of people yesterday, just kind of picking people's brains on what it means to have feel for the game. I asked a bunch of other people, and like something that was brought up is like there are people who can pass the ball and people who can pass the ball. And an example that somebody brought up to me was like, there's a reason why Halliburton is always going to be a much better passer than LaMelo Ball, right? Where he believed that LaMelo Ball is more of an assist guy, where Halliburton is someone who can really set things up and see things and make advanced reads, right? And I think with Salaun, I don't even know if we can say that he has like connective tissue. It's like so raw and so rough right now that it's almost like if we were giving him a grade, it's just like a NA right now, and it wouldn't even be like a letter grade.
Yeah, I agree. But he might not need to. And as Mr. Ray in the comments says, Salaun at 6'10", 6'11" as a play finisher is still a valuable piece.
Of course,
if the shooting is real. And I agree. And you go back to, like you mentioned, Obi Toppin. Like, I actually think Obi can pass a little bit, but like that's not what he is known for, right? It's like he's either going to shoot a three or he's going to like dunk an alley-oop. And he's on a good team now and like contributing, and he's played on good teams, even if he's playing behind players that are better than him. He's still an NBA player at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. What about the defense now? What were your impressions?
Okay, so defensively, I thought there was a little bit of an over-reliance on his length and his hands, where I felt like as an on-ball defender at times he got a little like reliant with using his length and poking at balls and kind of not getting himself in good position, was how I felt at times. But the length is real with him. Like, he's a really long, big dude that is going to affect a lot of shots. But at the same time, not like he had a ton of blocks either. So it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to develop. But in terms of like the raw tools with him, obviously it's going to be something where NBA teams are going to want to invest in him as a defender and try to develop him into some sort of defender, whether it's interior or perimeter. But I just feel like even his defense is another incomplete grade for me, just because a lot of it is not so good right now. And even off ball, I thought at times like a lot of young players, I thought the concentration kind of came in and out, and even like aggression, intensity and stuff. But as you're playing some clips of him, playing the passing lanes and stuff, that stuff, it can be nice. Absolutely. But I think there needs a lot. He needs a lot more refinement before we can say that like he's going to be like a rock solid defender, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he plays pretty hard on both ends. Like I do think he gives a shit.
Yeah.
And he wants to be somebody who is impacting both sides of the ball. Like, he's just turned 18. So like playing in a pro league, like to be expected to be some perfect defender is just not realistic. I do think that his positioning is pretty okay. Like I think he's usually in the right spots. But I also like, he's 6'10", 6'11". He like, part of the reason that he's like a pure four is like he just cannot protect the rim, and he doesn't know how to use his athletic tools in a way that he can do it. Now, I think what he's good at is just like getting really tall and using that standing reach. But like for somebody who is like fluid and whatever at 6'10", 6'11", he's not like very athletic. Like I don't think he's like particularly quick, and I don't think he has like particularly good bounce either. So like he doesn't have that ability to like explode, as the low man and just like get vertical and really like force somebody to second think their shot at the rim. He's just kind of like there, and he's ground bound, and he's like hoping that the fact that he's a big dude who's like kind of long is enough. And like the fact that he's so skinny, like a lot of times it's not. Like even on the ball, big wings will go through his chest. But I think that that's stuff that like he's just going to get better at that because he's going to get stronger and older and like more physical at some point. I wish he was like a little more disruptive either way, and able to use those tools in his size. But again, he's young, so he's got to figure this stuff out. But I think the main thing that gets you on the floor in the NBA is going to be defense. Like, you got to be able to defend just as much as you can shoot, because like everybody could shoot at a baseline level, it feels like now in the NBA, at least like open shots. So like you have to, and 38% from three is like probably below average.
Yeah, we're getting there.
You know, like so the higher the bar is to like be like, oh, this guy's a real shooter, the more you have to be able to do the other stuff. So like it's going to be a while before he's able to, you know, participate on an NBA floor, just because defensively, I think he has a lot to learn. But again, he tries hard, and if he's willing to work at it, and again, I think his positioning is usually pretty good. There's certainly potential there. And if he becomes a guy who can even defend at an average level at his height as a play finisher, yeah, worth it.
Yeah. Corey, I think everything that we're saying is, I think an NBA team taking him in the lottery, first round, whatever, they're going to kind of look at him as like a Bruno Cabocla type of thing, 2 years away from being 2 years away. And that's okay, right? Because once again, he's that young, and there is a foundation there with his body and his shooting ability and some of the fluidity stuff and ball handling stuff, where you are willing to give this type of guy that type of leeway, right? Where you're going to be like, hey, take your 2-3 years to develop. We're willing to give you that because we want to see you develop, whether that's in the G League or even with the, you know, with the NBA team in limited minutes in maybe your second, third year. So I think with him, there's so much to him that's intriguing that a team is going to buy in, and a team is going to give him that runway to develop. So it'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, I think you and I are on the same page in terms of, I think both ends of the floor. Like, there's still a lot of work to be done for him to be ready to really contribute to an NBA team.
So if you were buying stock in Salaun, who may you have bought stock in previously?
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned it, but I'm like a, you know, we got Obi Toppin when he was older coming into the NBA, right? But maybe this is what Obi Toppin looked like when he was 18. Right? Maybe. But obviously, like you mentioned, I think Obi definitely was a better passer and had more of a post-up game in college and things like that. But just, you know, when I look at how he moves and the shooting ability, and Obi's a better athlete too. But just overall, like I thought that was the closest I could get in terms of an NBA comp, just because of just so many similarities with how they moved, I thought. But yeah, definitely a big gap in terms of athleticism, as you know, Obi is a freak athlete. But yeah, just like the stiffness and that type of stuff really reminded me of Obi, at least aesthetically. So that's who I'll go with.
So I think there is a large spectrum of outcomes for Salaun. And I think the high end dream, if you're like, you know, in the war room trying to make the decision in the early lottery, and you're like, Salaun's our guy. It's like, why can't he be Michael Porter Jr.? Another 6'11" stiff dude, had back surgery. So, who's just absolutely massive and can like knock down tough shots, and like he can create shots for himself. But he's not really relied on to do it too often. And like, if you pair him with like an elite playmaker who's going to find him in all of his spots, like, why can't he contribute in a similar fashion?
Right.
Now, Michael Porter Jr. is an elite shooter. So the shot has to work, because Michael Porter Jr., who shoots 33%, is not going to be on a court very long. And that's where like Salaun can also be Kevin Knox. So it's a scary proposition, because as much potential as you might have, like, there are also the floor outcomes that are probably much more likely than whatever, you know, glass half full outcome we see, because of how talented the league is. So those were kind of the two guys who were like these big multi-tool dudes who have some skill. One was in a great situation. The other liked Fortnite a lot. But playing better. He's still getting contracts, right? He's still getting shots in the league because he is a big wing who has some skill. And, you know, it's not going to surprise me if he's still in the league 5 years from now, right? Like on playing like on some playoff team and contributing in a real way. So Salaun's the type of guy that, like, it's probably not going to happen on his first team.
Mm.
And, maybe that weighs into the decision of like how high you actually draft him.
I actually think it's crazy that you brought up Kevin Knox, Corey, just because I actually wrote a little bit about Kevin Knox in my piece coming up on Keyshawn George. Just because with Knox, it was such a thing with him, right? Where he was 6'8", crazy long, pretty good athlete. People thought he was going to be able to shoot it. But if you go back and watch him, like he had like almost no feel. He was just kind of a guy, and he was like so plodding on the defensive side, really couldn't move his feet at all. And there are so many theoreticals with a guy like Kevin Knox, right? Like if he can be a more consistent shooter, if he can tighten up the handle, if he can learn to, play within a system, play within the flow of an offense, blah, blah, blah. There's so many ifs, right? With Kevin Knox. And it's interesting that you bring him up here, because with Salaun, we kind of spent the last, 20, 30 minutes talking about a lot of ifs with him as well. And so I think it's a really intriguing name. And as you mentioned, Kevin Knox is somehow still in the league, and he may continue to be in the league just because of all the things that we talked about. But like a Kevin Knox, there are a lot of ifs and question marks.
All right. So it's the return. I need you to sell me this pen on Tidjane Salaun.
God. So if you're interested in Kevin Knox, just kidding. Okay. So with Salaun, the sell with him is not that difficult, especially in a year like 2024 with the draft class that we have. You have a 6'10", 6'11" guy who can really shoot the ball, and he's improved as a shooter already just within this season. A guy that you're going to buy into his outside shot. You're going to buy into the fluidity and some of the awkwardness with his movement going away as he continues to grow into his body. You're going to believe in the ball handling getting better, and him potentially being a pretty dynamic, pretty interesting offensive four on your team, a guy that you can develop that could play next to a 1A, 1B, 2-star, and really contribute in a big way with his shooting and his versatility on that side of the ball. And then on the defensive side, you're betting on the length, you're betting on the frame, you're betting on his competitive spirit and his competitive level, and him becoming a solid defender one day. But he's a guy that you're really going to have to invest in. A lot of coaching, a lot of refinement has to come, but if it happens, he could become a really effective two-way four for you one day.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's got to be the sell, right? All right, let's head on over to our next prospect, which is, again, like you mentioned, like an interesting juxtaposition between Risacher and Salaun in the fact that they are both, these big, long French wings who have like fairly similar skill sets. Now, obviously, like coming into the year, you and I were a little bit more familiar with Risacher, having seen him at the Nike Hoop Summit drink. So Zaccharie Risacher plays for JL Bourg. He is a swing wing. I think he's got a little bit more positional flexibility than Salaun did. He is listed on the team site at 6'8", 205. Now, I want to say, like, with Risacher, I remember on the game day when we were on the court, and I don't know what it was about the Blazers court, but I was like, why does every prospect look 2 inches taller here? Like, I was like, Aiden Holloway looks like he's 6'4" today. But he looked absolutely massive, where I was like, is this dude 6'10", 6'11"? Yeah. And so big dude, big wing. He'll be 19 years old on draft night. 22.9 minutes per game, 11.7 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 1.5 turnovers, 1 steal, 0.4 blocks, shooting 53.1% from the floor, 48.2% from 3 on 3.5 attempts a game, 71.3% from the line on 3 free throw attempts per game. True shooting percentage 65.6. Preseason stock price, ESPN had him at 3. No Ceilings had him at 12. Bleacher Report had him at 5. Yahoo had him at 6. The Athletic had him at 17. Tankathon had him at 7 for an average price of 8.3. He came in at 8th on the Draft Deck IPO. Currently, ESPN has him at 2. No Ceilings had him at 6 in January. Bleacher Report had him at 6. Yahoo at 3. The Ringer at 3. The Athletic had him at 4. Tankathon had him at 3. Average price of 3.85. He is 3rd on the January draft ranking. So, is Risacher stock price too high, too low, or is it just right?
Give me just right. I could see it. And it's not too far from where I have him. I have him at 5 right now. So for him to be at 3 and for me to say that's too high is stupid, right? And once again, this is that draft where anyone can go anywhere and it's not crazy. So for me, Corey, 3 feels okay. I'm okay with it.
I am also okay with it. I believe I have him at 5 as well, but I do think that, he's a guy that I can see continue to, climb my board because of the fact that he is a two-way guy that I can actually believe in. Now, considering we just did the exercise with Salaun, if you had $10 to invest in Risacher, Salaun, and Mattis Buzelis, how would you spend your $10?
Damn. Okay, I'll do this is actually tough. Yeah. Okay, I'll go Risacher 5, Buzelis 3, Salaun 2.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go similar, 450 for Risacher, 350 for Buzelis, and 2 for Salaun.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that there are a number of these kinds of wings that are all kind of in the same ballpark and range, and I think could any one of them can go ahead of the other given the preference by a particular front office. So while this draft is weird and whatever, like maybe it has a little bit of depth at like this big wing position.
It's just it's interesting, and it's funny that you brought up those 3 guys, just because there isn't, and I think that kind of reflected in how we kind of divvied up the $10, but there isn't a huge gulf in between the 3 guys. I know I have Salaun at 22 and then Risacher at 5, but even between 5 and 22, I don't think there's a huge gap between those 2 guys. And once again, I think that speaks to this class and how bunched up everyone seems to be. But how are you viewing these 3 guys, right? You're seeing them as like bigger wings who can shoot the ball, who might be able to give you a little extra here and there. And as you mentioned, and we'll get to it later, but I think Risacher for me gets the biggest chunk of the $10 because I believe in his defense more than the other 2 guys, right?
Yeah.
Is where I'm at right now. So it's interesting though, because there are those 3 guys, and there are other wings too, I think, in this class that are going to be kind of similar and will be viewed similarly in terms of what their roles would be in the NBA as well. So a really interesting thought exercise.
So first off, I want to say shout out to everybody watching live in the chat. If you have not subscribed yet, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, all that good stuff. Now going into the comments, Gregory Castillo says 6'9" shooter, don't overthink it like Trey Murphy. And I think that's going to be an interesting way to get into our conversation about his shooting, because he has been absolutely on fire right this year. Like he is straight up sniper type percentages from 3. I mean, on the year, he's shooting 48% from 3, right? Like crazy stuff. Where I get a little bit of hesitancy to be like, I completely buy into his shooting is one, an entire week of watching him at the Hoop Summit practices. Like that wouldn't have been what I was like, yeah, he's a great shooter. Like that's not something that I would have said about him, right? He's also shooting 70% from the free throw line. Like, and we're gonna like Trey Murphy shot 93% from the free throw line his last year of college. Like Trey Murphy was a legit shooter, and even the year before on because it wasn't that much volume. Trey Murphy had shot like 83% or whatever. So like this is a dude who you knew was an elite shooter. Where with Risacher, I'm almost like I got to see him go through like a cold spell. I got to see what happens when his confidence wavers because like when his confidence wavers, he has been like pretty unproductive at times. And like I buy the shooting, but I'm not willing to, pay a premium price for the shooting. Like I just think it's like he's a good shooter. I don't think he's a 48% 3-point shooter. If he is, great. But I'm a little bit hesitant to like completely buy into it where it's like he's one of the most elite shooters in this class because I think it might just be an outlier shooting year right now. And maybe he comes in and plays a similar role and he's just like mostly a spot up guy and it's awesome. But some of the touch stuff in other areas, like, when he curls a screen and shoots in the mid range, like I think his touch is a little awkward. The free throw percentage, obviously, like being in the low 70s for somebody who you would think is an elite shooter because he's shooting 48% from three. I'm just saying I have some questions. Some. Albert, I think you're muted.
Whoops, sorry. I get it. And I think part of it, as you were talking about it, I thought of like Grayson Allen, who is currently shooting just under 50% from three on the season and having an unbelievable season shooting from that side. But even for Grayson Allen, like it's not a crazy anomaly just because he's playing with the Suns and he plays off of Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. And, the quality of shots that he's getting is great. And he's always been about a 40% shooter. But he's always been 40%. And this year he's at 50. So it is a pretty huge jump and it's been great for him, but also he's always been like 86%, 90% from the free throw line. So with Risacher, Corey, I understand your reservations. I think you and I have always said like, hey, if you believe in a shooter being an elite shooter, look at their free throw shooting percentage. Like that's actually like a really important number for us. And so, I mean, even if we compare it to a guy like Reed Shepherd, who is, his numbers are mind-blowing stuff. So I'm with you, Corey. It's just, I had a different experience with him at Hoop Summit because, as we've mentioned, I came like a day or two after you guys. So I got to see Risacher practice only twice and then play in the game. Or I don't even remember if you played in the game. But in the practices that I saw, I also didn't walk away from those practices thinking like, oh, this guy's a dead-eye shooter. But I did like him. There was something about his game that I thought was interesting. And there was one scrimmage where I think he scored like 2 or 3 buckets in a row. And I was like, oh, I like this guy. But I, like you, Corey, did not leave Portland thinking, oh, that guy's going to go back to France and shoot the cover off the ball this season. Was kind of just not in my notes at all. But from what I've seen, I like it. He's doing it off of movement. He's doing some of it off the dribble. A lot of it obviously is catch and shoot, but so far it's been good. And let's just hope that, he needed, and also, he had a really tough summer, where he didn't play well, and maybe he needed that to kind of get him going and to kind of find his rhythm and where he's at right now. But as you mentioned, Corey, I think we're going to have to continue to monitor this throughout the season to see what it looks like over the course of a full season in Europe.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I think he's a good shooter. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing super rough about his form. Like his form's pretty good. There are some things. Yeah, exactly. I look if I was like he is going to be a 40% 3-point shooter in the league, no doubt about it in my mind. Like if the Pistons get the number 1 pick, like he makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Like at least, because I do think that you should be taking fit into account a little bit in that godforsaken situation.
I put Kevin Knox.
But look, I think that he's been good. Like, we just saw in that clip, like he comes off movement and he's like pretty confident, like with a quick trigger to let it fly. Not a whole lot of like self creation, but he doesn't need that. Like spot up, repeatable. And he's got a pretty versatile shooting profile because of it. He can put the ball on the floor and take a dribble or two. He's got a little bit of a step back, like not much, but he can do it, and just to like get his balance. So I buy the shooting. I'm just saying, like, I don't know if it's like a lock. It wouldn't. And we had this conversation with Ignacio when we were doing our mock drafts. Our last mock draft, where it's like, it's just not he doesn't have a long history of being an elite shooter. So there's reason to be a little bit skeptical, but it's going in. And like at a certain point, if it keeps going in and it looks good, like, you gotta buy it a little bit. So.
No, the concern is this more of a flash than what we should expect? Which I get, Corey. I remember back in the 90s, there was like a season where, not just a season, but even this comp isn't fair. Cause like, I was thinking about like Antoine Walker, right? With the Celtics, where he was a guy who's, playing the 4 for them, taking a lot of threes for that. I mean, there's one season I'm looking at it right now, All-Star season, he took 8 threes per game. Right. And, a guy that eventually had weird issues with free throw shooting later on, which I don't know, maybe that's Risacher, I don't know. But Corey, I get what you're saying. When we're talking about him being an elite shooter, we just need to see more of it. We need to see a longer sample size for us to kind of get there. And I think a 70% free throw shooter is a red flag. It should be. Like, Julius Randle shoots better than that at the free throw line, right? So, and no one is ever considering Julius Randle as an elite shooter. So, I think it's something we just have to continue to monitor. But let's say, Corey, like we get to the end of the season and he's still shooting the 3 like that, and he can bump up his free throw shooting to, I don't know, high 70s by that point. Maybe we'll feel a little different, right? But even still, I think you're going to have some question marks about whether or not he'll be able to shoot it to that level at the NBA as well.
Yeah, and look, he's still very young. He's 18. It's not like he's, some, senior in college and he's had no history of shooting it well, and all of a sudden he's shooting it well this year. Like, he's a young player who's putting in work and has gotten better, and this just could be the trajectory that he's on. And maybe you just don't overthink it because he cleaned up this one area of his game, and the free throws could be next, right? But at the end of the day, he is shooting at a good percentage at 6'9", and like, he's valuable if he's knocking down shots like this. And there's no reason to believe that he's not going to at least be an adequate shooter at the next level. And I feel a lot more confident in some of his ancillary skills than I do, in Salaun. So, like, I feel a lot more confident in him using that shooting gravity to attack in a straight line, or like we're seeing here, kind of grabbing and going. I think like he's got a much tighter handle than Salaun. Maybe not as creative. Maybe he colors between the lines a lot more than Salaun is willing to. But I feel more comfortable with the ball in his hands. He doesn't have a lot of shake. He doesn't, there's not a lot of shift. But I don't get worried. Like, I'm in the passenger seat of a car and it's a yellow light, and I'm like, I don't really think that my friend who's driving should be trying to speed through this yellow, because I think there's a 18-wheeler coming, like I do with Salaun. So I think the ancillary stuff, I feel a lot more confident with Risacher.
Yeah, Corey, I think the point that you made about the handle is important, where maybe we wouldn't even quantify his handle being better, but maybe we say it's different. Is maybe one way to put it. I'm not saying it is for sure, but maybe that's like how we're ultimately feeling about it, just because it is safer, right? And also, like, even his drives to the basket do feel a little bit safer, but also, Corey, like, there is a thing with Risacher where because he is also another guy who doesn't have a ton of vertical pop, I do feel more confident when he's going to the rim, but also there are moments where it gets a little wonky because of the lack of vertical pop. And there were moments I thought where like he would overextend himself trying to make something happen and try to get to the basket for a bucket. But at the same time, I would not say that he's anywhere near as bad as some of the stuff that we saw from Salaun. It's just, I think it's still something that he's got to just continue to tighten up. Like, I don't think even Corey, with what you're saying, I don't think either one of us are saying that we think he's an elite finisher at the rim. It's just, he's definitely a safer finisher than what we saw from Salaun is, I think, where I land at least.
I think he makes way better choices.
Mm.
I mean, like, so his percentages as a finisher, he's 72.5% at the rim, 70.6% in the half court. Now, that is on 17 attempts in the half court. So I don't know, like 1 a game, something like that, you know? So it's very low sample size. And I think it's because he's not forcing the issue like maybe Salaun would be willing to, you know? I think, you know, he's more willing to make those kind of in between choices where he will pull up in the mid range and come off a curl, off movement. Like, he's not a big time cutter, but he does creative things to get himself open off of the ball, to get himself looks. And even if it doesn't result in him getting all the way to the rim in the half court, he's still like, you know, I think doing positive things and making defenses react with the way that he moves off of the ball. And then, you know, when it comes to playmaking, like I buy the connective aspect of his game. Yeah, as Mr. Ray says, like the connectivity difference is pretty dramatic between the two prospects. And I agree. I think that there's a trustworthiness that I have in Risacher versus Salaun. And it's not to say that Risacher is like somebody who I'm like, this dude is a genius playmaker, right? Like, but I think that he's a good enough processor, a quick enough processor. And like, I can envision him at the next level, like the ball swinging his way, and then he's making like quick second side reads where he's attacking and then dishing to the weak side, or he's like getting the ball reversed to the wing, and he's now coming off like a quick pick and roll, and he's able to hit the roller or whatever, or he's flying off of, you know, like a floppy set and guys jump out at him and he's able to hit the roll there. Like, I think he's going to be capable of that. Now, at the same time, he has been way more of a play finisher than a play creator in his role as well. But I definitely buy his ability to make the right play a little bit more, or a lot more, than I do with Salaun.
Yeah, Corey, I think you're definitely not saying you think he's some elite creator. I think he's another guy that's more turnovers and assists, right? If I didn't see that wrong. So definitely wouldn't say that he's an elite creator or anything like that. But the connective tissue stuff is definitely there. Way more than what we saw from Salaun. And another thing with him that I like is I think, and you mentioned it in passing before, but I think he's a really good cutter, dude. I think he's a really good cutter, really good off-ball mover, where he creates opportunities for himself to get open and to get cleaner looks. And one thing that I wanted to throw in there with his finishing, he doesn't go to it often, but I think he's a pretty good left-hand finisher too, in some of the limited stuff that I saw. And also some nice, like, crafty, savvy, high off the backboard layups that, you know, show off, you know, some of that touch with him, where, you know, sometimes with him not being an elite athlete and not being the strongest guy, he's still kind of pretty slight in frame. But some of the really high off the backboard stuff was nice to see, and it was a nice little wrinkle to some of his at rim finishing. So I'm with you, Corey. I think he's good. I think, you know, offensively, at least, he's going to have a lot to offer. And that's why, because we're more sure about his offensive game than Salaun, that's why he ends up in the top 5 for a lot of people on their boards, considering the size and all that. And also, Corey, I really do agree. Like, he definitely looked taller to me than 6'8" in person, but who knows? I mean, we'll see at the combine what all that turns out to be. But just you feel more confident in his outlook than a guy like Salaun because of the more foundational skills that he has.
And then I buy him defensively more.
Oh yeah, big time
at this moment than I do with Salaun, right? Like, I think that he's been really impressive
Mhm.
defensively. And like, I think that because it's weird because in person I was like, he's like a really good mover, but like also he moves a little funky. And again, that could just be like age and growing into your body. But he's looks like much more fluid on that end. Something that I really love is like he's able to get skinny over screens.
Mhm.
Like, and at his length, like being able to like fight over screens and be slithery like that, I think is really impressive. Um, and then like when he goes over and trails the screen, like he's able to guard from behind
Mhm.
and kind of use his length to like at least bother shooters. I think he moves really well laterally.
Yes.
Smart defender, like active hands. Obviously he needs to get stronger, goes without saying, right? But like plays hard, fights, like very nuanced game. And yeah, I think that two-way ability that he has now, like I'm not saying that he's going to be, a defensive player of the year candidate and all defense team candidate. Like I don't necessarily feel that way, but like I think that he's going to have real two-way ability. And that's the kind of thing that's going to get you on the floor early and earn the trust. Like his game on both sides of the ball is he's effective in a really simple way. And obviously defense is not simple. Defense is very complex, especially NBA defense. But I think he has those complexities and the nuance to his defensive game. And then the offense is so simple that I think he's the type of guy that will get on the floor early, and obviously he's going to go to a team that is not very talented. So he should be playing a ton. And but he's been impressive as a two-way guy.
I mean, Corey, I feel like you almost covered everything on the defensive side of the ball with him. And wanted to give a shout out to Metcalf too, who wrote a great piece about Risacher and his game and what he's been showing defensively, because like some of the on ball stuff with him has been awesome. And you mentioned it, right? He's a really good lateral mover, can flip his hips, a guy that can that really fights to stay in front of his man too, even with his slighter frame right now. It's just it big time, right? Just because of how he moves laterally. It's so exciting. And he's got his size and he's got his length. But as he adds his strength, his grown man strength, you can't help but wonder how disruptive of a defender he could eventually become, even more so than what he is now, right? So if you consider all of so ultimately, Corey, we just have less question marks about him than we did a guy like Salaun. And if you have less question marks, especially on the defensive side, he has way less question marks than I think Salaun does. You can't help but be excited, and that's why he's higher on the board. But with Risacher for sure, like the on-ball stuff was really interesting to me, and I think off-ball stuff too. Like he just knew where to be, did a good job of being a good team defender as well. So I feel like you covered everything, but it is what it is. Like he's just the less question marks he has, the higher you're going to be. So right there with you.
Yeah. He's going to be a guy that I think is steadily in the top 5 conversation for the rest of this draft cycle. Okay, so if you're buying stock in Zaccharie Risacher, who may you have bought stock in previously? We've had some good ones in the comments.
Yeah, I actually can't see the comments right now. I don't know what's wrong with my thing, but
we've got a Josh Eustace. We've got Keegan Murray. We've got fun Patrick Baldwin. A taller Evan Fournier.
French, yeah. And someone brought up what was the name? Trey Murphy before.
We got Jetty Osman.
So I'm kind of along those lines, Corey. I thought of taller Rudy Fernandez was one that I thought of. If you think about how he played for the Portland Trailblazers back in late 2000s, right? I think we're talking late 2000s-ish. Like a taller.
Early. How do you?
Because he played
early, the late aughts. I never know how you talk about that the early 2000s and contextually.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But anyway, Rudy Fernandez was one name that came to mind. Cam Johnson, maybe a little bit. I don't know. Was another guy that came to mind. Bigger wing. Johnson came in a lot older, but a guy who's going to shoot it from outside, compete for you defensively, a guy who's going to be a very valuable wing as like a play finisher type of guy as well. So yeah, I thought of taller Rudy Fernandez, obviously less athletic than Rudy was, but kind of similar energies, I thought, and maybe a little Cam Johnson.
I like those. I got maybe a little Nikola Mirotic, who
Barcelona legend.
Yeah.
Bobby Porter's favorite dude.
Who I think that was the season that Bobby Portis punched Mirotic.
Yeah.
He was out for a while. The Bulls were terrible. They were going to be in position to get into the top of that draft in a real tangible way. And then Mirotic came back and went on an absolutely insane heater.
Yeah.
And the Bulls ended up at the 7th pick and drafted Wendell Carter Jr. Instead of being in position to draft Luka Doncic. But ultimately, it probably wouldn't have mattered because all the rumors were that the front office liked Marvin Bagley anyway. So, little off-topic tangent there from my recollection of the real GM experience at that time. Also, there's, a little bit of Franz Wagner. Little Franz, like maybe hasn't shown as much on-ball stuff, but at the same time, like there were a lot of question marks about Franz. Like people forget that like Franz wasn't like he was the safe pick in that he was a guy who had that high floor, but he wasn't thought of to have that high ceiling, and that's why the Warriors took Jonathan Kuminga over him, and he went where he did. Like because people thought he was just very safe, but because he had that really terrible, like what was it, like 0 for 11 in his last college game, people were like very iffy on anything beyond that. So I don't know, like maybe there is an outcome where he turns into like some kind of version of, what Franz is, maybe not. I mean, Franz is amazing. So probably not, it's a high bar, but like, you could see it a little more on-ball reps at the next level, and there's an outcome.
And it's funny, Corey, because we loved Franz and we still didn't see this coming. We were, but I still remember doing his pod and we praised him for like an hour, and we really, really liked his game. We thought he was built for the modern NBA. We thought he was going to be a really good complementary player and a guy that I think both of us were like, if you take him in the lottery, no problem, was how both of us felt. And yet neither one of us, I think, saw this coming. So
no.
Maybe it's the same thing with Risacher, right? Where both of us, we have him top 5 because of this class, right? And we see him as like a really good play finisher, shooting from outside, defensive guy. And then maybe he gets to the league and he blossoms even more into maybe a Franz type. It can definitely happen because we definitely didn't see it with Franz, and look at what he's become. So maybe the same can happen here.
Yeah, right situation, right development plan, right opportunities. So we'll see. I mean, looking at the top of the draft, there are some, I don't know how many teams I'd be stoked outside of like San Antonio, like even Portland, who I think if Portland were able to draft him, like they have a great young core, but they also have 1,000 6'9" wings. So maybe they just, kind of give him the keys for that role because, he'd be a high pick, but there's no guarantee of that. Right. I kind of like him next to Brandon Miller.
Yeah.
In Charlotte. I think that'd be fun. The Wizards would be, I mean, I like him next to Koulibaly, but I guess it depends what happens with Kuzma and Jordan Poole and that mess. The Pistons would be a really good fit too. So he's a guy that you could just kind of throw anywhere and it works, right? He'd look good next to Scotty Barnes.
Yeah.
Wow. Toronto.
Him, Ausar, Cade, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah. And if the shooting's real, then that becomes, then that becomes really interesting because they need somebody where the shooting's going to be real. They need it.
And then if he just plays defense like this and better with Ausar, good Lord.
Yeah.
Fun.
All right. again, it is that time, Albert. I need you to
Uh-huh.
sell me this pen on Zaccharie Risacher.
I don't think I've ever done a 2-for-1 like this in terms of selling pens. And also, I haven't sold pens in a while. So this feels incredible, but also feels really sudden. But when it comes to Zaccharie Risacher, we're talking about a guy who has great NBA jumbo wing size, a guy who has shown this season that he can really shoot the ball, a guy who we believe may be able to show more with the ball in his hands next season. Pretty good passer. Nothing special or elite about his passing, but good connective tissue to him. Obviously, on the defensive side of the ball, we like what we've seen on ball, off ball, team defense, all that stuff. So if you're looking for a two-way wing with really good size that we believe is going to be able to add, a good amount of muscle as well, who maybe one day becomes like a number 1, number 2 option, even if all the cards fall right and the 1% outcome happens, who knows what he could eventually be. And we obviously talked about even a guy like Franz Wagner as an example, but Risacher is a really interesting prospect because of his baseline foundation and the skill set that he has, with also the ceiling or maybe lack of ceiling in terms of what he can become. So a really interesting two-way wing that you should feel pretty good about if you take him in the top 5 in the upcoming 2024 NBA draft.
Yeah, 100%. One of the safest players, I think, looking like one of the safest players in the draft. Looks like a whole new player coming out of what was a rough summer. And, the fact that he turned it around is a tip of the cap to him. Albert, I just want to update you on Dalton Connect, who just had another 31-point game.
Yeah. Yeah, he's good at those 30-point games, man.
That dude is hooping.
Yeah. Insane.
Yeah.
What do we compare this to? Doug McDermott? Tough. I don't know, dude. This is crazy.
He's like bouncier, worse handled Devin Booker. Older.
Bouncier, worse handled Devin. Wow. Okay. But no, I was just thinking of like
old prospects for getting buckets.
Exactly. Buddy Hield, right, in Oklahoma his last season.
Yeah.
One of those seasons.
But it's hard to make a comparison because he's doing it in his first season where he transfers up.
Yeah, true.
To a high major.
Good for him.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Another guy who will get drafted pretty high.
Agreed. All right. Guys, thank you for watching live. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Again, if you have not yet, please subscribe to No Ceilings YouTube channel. We just crossed 6,000 subscribers. We would love to be at 10 before the draft. So if you have not yet, make sure you subscribe, share it, like the video, smash that like button if you were in the chat watching live. And we appreciate everybody participating in the chat, watching, all the support. As always, make sure that you tap into NoCeilingsNBA.com for a bunch of free content Monday through Friday delivered directly to your inbox. Albert is writing about Keyshawn George this week, which I'm really looking forward to reading because I'm a big fan of his game and the potential that he has. And I think he's a kind of wild card prospect that could shake up the draft, or he could return and, kind of hone in on some stuff and maybe be, a top 5 guy next year. I don't know. There's no way of knowing in the draft world. But I'm excited to read that. So Albert, tell the people where they can find you outside of NoCeilingsNBA.com.
Yeah, you can find me at Alberto Gim on Twitter. You can find me at GTGNBA on Instagram. As always, this hoodie from A Bit New York, Kevin Park, www.abitnyc.com. Also can find him on Instagram at abit.nyc if you're interested in. He just had a new drop this weekend, and he continues to pump out awesome clothing. So if you're interested in any of that, go check him out. And yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah. And so definitely do that. And also, if you guys got companies out there and you want to send us some free stuff, get in touch. And, we will definitely do our Wayne's World pitch for sure. We're willing to sell out. So you can find me at Corey Tulaba on Twitter, at NBA Draft Dude elsewhere. And again, we appreciate everybody rocking with us live. And until next time, where we break down more NBA draft prospects, we are out. Peace.
Peace.